gentlemen, please welcome Tom Kuhn, President of the Edison Electric Institute.
Hello, everyone. You notice that everybody's leaving the room, so I appreciate the ones that are staying here. I'm the dummy that's just filling in here between the last panel and this one, but I do want to welcome you and tell you how much I appreciate everybody being here. I think, what do you think about this name, Institute for Electric Innovation? Isn't it wonderful? We could actually drop the electric because just about every innovation is electric anyway. So, and I think you see from Innovation Alley out there just how much electricity is powering the people. We think it's a huge mission, but you know, it's just it's every part of our life. It's every part of the modern lifestyle to propel the economy, whether or not it's the smartphones, appliances, homes, and all those things that are moving along. And I think that you got a flavor from the last panel about how much innovation is happening. I think some of those things that were talked about really weren't even on our radar the last year. The thing that, you know, I just gave a speech up in New York, and the thing I'd also like to recognize is the 500,000 smart people we have in our industry to make this all happen, because really they are the key. You know, in storms and other natural disasters, they're the people that are out in the lines keeping the grid going, and I think that they're the ones that are, I always say, are the heart of our industry. So I guess for the rest of the day, you're going to continue to hear about new developments. You heard some of the new technologies coming online. The next panel, and if I can call them up right now to come on up, Ted and the gang, you're going to hear about how the industry is transforming too, with smart, you know, the smart grids and the things that are happening too and changing with respect to the way we deliver power. So please give a warm welcome to Ted Craver, who is going to moderate our next panel, the Chairman and CEO of Edison International. Thank you. And now that you guys are up here, the audience will start coming back in here.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Tom, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ted Craver. I'm the Chairman and CEO for Edison International. Our largest subsidiary is Southern California Edison. And I have the pleasure of moderating this panel on positioning, so one of these really long titles, though. I can't remember all that. Positioning the power grid for the 21st century and beyond. So with such a modest beginning, maybe I'll take this opportunity to introduce our panel. So sitting right next to me in red is Leslie Seibert. Leslie is Vice President for Distribution at Georgia Power Company. And next to her is Eric. Now we had a little trial run at this earlier to see if I can do this. I have a CFO by the name of Szilagyi. So it's going to be hard not to want to pronounce it similarly, but Szilagyi, Eric Szilagyi, who is president of Florida Power and Light Company. And next to him is Dave Sparby. Dave he wins the award for the longest title. He is senior vice president, group president for Xcel Energy, and president and CEO of Northern States Power Company in Minnesota. And last but not least, my colleague Michael Yakura. Michael is Chief Executive Officer for NV Energy and is the current chairman for Edison Electric Institute. So those are our panelists, and what I wanted to do, just as a way of kind of getting things started, you know, when you think about probably everyone in the room that's involved with a utility directly has pretty much the same mission, similar mission statement, where they want to provide safe, reliable, affordable electricity for their customers. More recently, in the last few decades, often clean gets in there as well, but for decades, it's safe, reliable, affordable electricity. And we know if we don't do that well, we're not really satisfying our fundamental mission. We're not really serving our customers properly. And if we do it poorly, I think we would expect we just won't be around to do it. And one of the most important parts of delivering on that mission is our investment in the grid. that really is the essential building block of everything that we do. It's the way we serve our customers, it's the way we serve our mission, and indeed it's the way we provide a fair return to our investors. One of those factoids, I think I might have picked this up from Tom Kuhn actually, but one of the factoids that I really enjoy using, the National Academy of Engineers did a survey a little while back, and they determined in their wisdom that looking back over the entire 1900s, so the 20th century, that the #1 engineering feat of the century was building the American electric grid. Just for reference, #2 was automobiles. #8 were some of the folks that were up here before, computers. So they've all left, so I knew I could get away with that.
We're going to fight already.
But I think that's really something when you think about it. So the #1 engineering feat in the 20th century was building the American electric grid. So obviously it's what have you done for me lately? You know, 20th century is gone. We're into the 21st century. The key is how do we continue to make the electric grid vibrant, resilient, the center really of our modern society. And I wanted to start our discussion here today by asking all of our panelists to first kind of really tell us what are they doing to invest in the grid, to modernize the grid, if you will, build the next generation grid. And if you also could give us just some indication of your annual spend, your capital expenditures in building out the grid, so we just have some general sense of what's actually being invested. So Leslie, would you like to start us off?
I'd be glad to start. Just so everybody knows, when I speak, I know I'm from Georgia Power, but I'm part of a subsidiary of Southern Company, which has four other electric utilities that serve the states of Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and Mississippi. So when I speak today, I'm going to be speaking as a Southern Company employee and relating that information to you from that aspect. But we have been very engaged in what I call modernizing the grid, which to me is making the grid smarter. It's not only a self-healing grid, it's also a grid that's able to detect when a piece of equipment's health is failing. It's also a grid that can integrate distributed resources, whether they be energy storage, whether they be intermittent distributed generation like we talked about today with renewable resources. So it's adapting and having the ability to do that. I think there have been some major advancements in microelectronics and information technology and communication that are all facilitating the ability to make our grid smarter going forward. We have made significant investments over the past 10 years. We started smart grid when it wasn't smart grid in implementing devices in the field. Obviously, with the Smart Grid Investment Grant that was afforded in 2010, we were a recipient of that grant and were able to advance things much quicker. But over the past 10 years, we've spent over $1 billion, I would say, in smart grid investments across Southern Company. Our customers have benefited from these not only through the efficiencies that we've gained to reduce cost, but also the service delivery that we're able to provide and the improvements in reliability that we've been able to make as a result of those investments.
And can you give us just a little idea of how much you all have been investing in grid modernization?
Sure. It's been about $1 billion over the past 10 years. And when I look at that as well, I look at AMI deployment. It's been a huge aspect for us, not only in the efficiency in reading meters, but we're leveraging those meters to do things on the operational side of the business as well. We've integrated those meters with our outage management system, which has allowed us to more promptly be able to respond to our customers during outages and reduces the need for them to call us and tell us that they're out because the meters are telling us that up front. So we'll continue to make investments going forward as well.
Eric?
Well, so like Southern Company, Florida Power and Light has been investing a significant amount. Give you a little bit of perspective, we serve about half of the state of Florida. So we have a large footprint from a geographic as well as a customer standpoint. We've got about 4.7 million customers, meters, and our territory stretches actually from the Florida-Georgia border on the East Coast down to the horn, if you will, of Key Largo and then up to Sarasota. So it's 35 counties, 27,000 square miles. We have about 74,000 miles of line in the system. Our investments have kind of covered the gamut, both from the smart meters and smart equipment that we put on the grid in the last 3 to 4 years. We completed an $800 million upgrade to our system last year. That was installing 4.6 million smart meters across our service territory and about 10,000 or so smart devices that go on the distribution and the transmission network. But we also look at it from a standpoint of investing in the grid on how do we also make the grid more resilient. It's great to have a smart grid, but if the grid's not, especially in an area like Florida, where unfortunately we are subject to a lot of adverse weather, we have to make sure that that grid is resilient. So we're also investing in technology to make it stronger, more resilient to weather. On average, right now, we're spending, outside of the smart meter deployment, about $200 million a year. We just completed a $500 million storm hardening program, and that was phase one. We're now in a $600 million program. We completed our $800 million smart meter investment, which, just like what Leslie was talking about, was an acceleration of what we were planning to do because of the DOE grant that we were able to receive, which was $200 million. So it's a good example of actually one of the programs the government does that really works, because it really helped us in accelerating that program. And that information that we're getting now has been of tremendous benefit to our customers already. We're seeing it, that not only the interaction that they are able to have with us, but also in the ability for us to interface it with our trouble tickets, with our response, with our storm response, making sure that now our customer experience is much better. We, just last year as an example, we had 1,600 trouble tickets that were actually created and resolved before the customer ever knew about it. They never contacted us. We let them know it was resolved. Just little things like that that are already making a big difference.
Great. Dave, how about you?
Okay, well, Xcel Energy, for those of you that don't know us, serves 8 states across the West and Midwest. We serve about 5.5 million customers throughout that service territory. And Ted, as you're probably aware, you know, when our utilities became regulated, the counties we were serving were growing at about 20% a decade. Use per customer was about 3% annually, and for cities like Minneapolis, we were adding about 25,000 customers a year. And the regulatory framework we wrote at the time fit that economy. And of course, today it's all different. You know, we're replacing or repowering some of that infrastructure. We're managing to much higher environmental standards, and we're integrating a lot of technologies that at the time weren't economic for us. And of course, we're seeing these, what are emerging megatrends in our industry, really show up in our rate cases, our resource planning, and our product pricing proceedings. Looking ahead, you know, we're going to be required to change our prices more frequently than we have in the past. And to do that, we've proposed multi-year plans to recover that distribution investment. We're going to need flexibility to offer that portfolio of resources that are going to be necessary for our customers, especially our municipalities, to meet their carbon and renewable objectives. And to do that, we're aggregating as well as creating some new services for them to reach their goals. And finally, and probably most importantly, we're working on getting our pricing right as we continue to customize our distribution services to ensure not only that the non-participants don't pay for the new services, but also that we can recover our costs. So in the final analysis, we intend to provide a grid that will allow an increasing number of applications. And in terms of the spend, the last 5 years has been between $400 and $500 million. But what's important is really not the level, but the composition of the spend, because what we've seen is the spend level rise, although the amount of capital that's been allocated for new customers has dropped off significantly, and that's gone to asset health.
That's going to be a good segue in a minute. We're going to peel it back a little bit. But Michael, how about you in terms of what you're doing to modernize the grid?
NV Energy covers about 95% of the state of Nevada, which is a rather small state from a population perspective, but very large geographically. I think back to my days at FPL, we have about twice the amount of service territory, 54,000 square miles of service territory, but less than half of the number of customers. So for us, it's a little different story from a technology perspective, we were the first IOU to reach an agreement with the DOE to get a grant during the time of the stimulus money to provide about half of a deployment of smart meters throughout the state. We completed that deployment mid-year last year. We're already seeing a change in the behaviors of our customers as well as integrating it back into the operations similar to what everybody's experiencing, where outages are known before our customers find out, and we can notify them as to when we'll get that back on, which is far better than them calling us and not having a clue, certainly. But there's a lot else going on in Nevada. I don't want to take up a lot of this time, but most of our work has been on creating a platform of a mix of generation units. The company had not spent any money for about 25 years on new generating plant while Nevada was growing by leaps and bounds, and we were stuck in a short position. We only provided about, or owned about 35% of the generating capacity necessary to meet the load. And we expanded that to now over 85%. And we just completed a bulk transmission line to tie the northern and southern Nevada systems together, so now we can share that. So when we look at resilience, we go beyond technology and we include reliability and the ability to share resources. But we've spent on that project, the transmission project, about $500 million, and I'd say over the past 10 years on things that are both resilience as well as technology, probably about $600–700 million.
It's kind of interesting. EEI has put some data together and did some projections as well. When you look at the 2014, 15, 16 period, EEI estimates that we'll be approaching $90 billion a year in investment from the investor-owned utility group. Of course, that's for everything, but obviously a big portion of that is going to find its way into grid modernization. One of the things that, again, I'd like to hear a little bit from all of you is, of course, we're doing this for our customers. So where have we really seen the big gains in these investments for our customers? Any special innovations in particular that you would want to note? Any special surprises that you've run into with those investments? But where have we seen the big gains for customers? What do they actually get out of this investment?
Well, I think for us, the gains that we've seen, again, in keeping costs low, I would say 48% of our customers for Southern Company make $40,000 or below. So cost is very, very important to our customers. And the efficiencies that we're able to gain by some of these deployments have actually helped us keep costs low or flat for those customers. I also think from a reliability standpoint, because we have self-healing networks, we've seen a significant reduction in outage minutes. So we've improved our service levels to our customers as well. So I think in those primary areas, we've seen a lot of benefit go back to the consumer.
It's a good benefit.
Well, same thing a little bit on the FPL side, but I think it also goes to what Michael was talking about, because it's a holistic, customer value experience that we look at. So in the last 5 years, we've invested $15 billion actually in our system, and that includes new generation, which started about 10 years ago to really wean ourselves off of using oil as the predominant source of generation. So 10 years ago, our company actually burned more oil than any utility in America to generate electricity, 41 million barrels a year is what we were averaging. Last year, we burned 250,000 barrels, and that was because we have to burn some oil to prove that we can burn oil in case we must burn oil. Otherwise, we would have burned none. So the benefit of that, of course, is on a variety of areas. For the value proposition, what it's helped do is help us control cost for customers. So in the last 5 years, our bills are actually down 15% net. Customers are actually paying us less than they did 5 years ago. They're actually paying us at levels that are about 1982, what we were charging. And a lot of that goes to both what you're using as your fuel mix for generation, but also on how efficiently and productivity you're able to get out of the corporation itself and out of the workforce. So we're actually doing more with less folks because we're enabling technology. I recently went back and looked at a variety of things like we're doing with the smart grid, and smart meters as an example have allowed us to go from a company that served when Michael was there and before, so in the mid-'80s, we were a company with 2.6 million customers, and FPL had 14,600 employees. We're now 4.7 million customers with 8,900 employees and better reliability than we've ever had before at 99.99%. So the technology is allowing us to be smarter on how we do things. Little things add up to big numbers in companies these sizes. Even being able to reduce your truck rolls on when you're identifying an issue that's on the grid now, because smart technology allows us to know exactly where it's happening rather than having to ride a line and try and figure it out. When you multiply that over the course of a year, you save a lot of money. Last year we saved, because of the smart grid technology, $3.4 million in productivity gains is what we saw, and 4.3 million minutes of outages that we avoided at our customer level. And that's directly because of the smart grid and technology we put on the grid and the smart meters.
And for us, along the same lines, it's been reliability, response time, and managing intermittency. You know, this past summer we had some severe storms across the Twin Cities area, and we were at one point with 600,000 customers out of service, and 90% of them were restored within 3 days. Had a similar storm a decade ago, and our response time wasn't nearly as good, and it's really the investments in the technology we've seen since then that have allowed us to get that much better. But it's also been managing renewables, and I'll make a commercial for our exhibit next door where we're talking about wind forecasting, for example. That effort to forecast our intermittent resources has saved our customers more than $30 million. And the industry, I think, just continues to get better at that and trying to integrate this new technology.
A little different point of view because of the modern grid that we have. Nevada was, a very small state, still a small state, but Las Vegas had about 50,000 people in it in 1950, and we now have approximately 2.5 million. So the grid is new, and we haven't spent a lot of money on grid modernization as yet. But as far as the smart meter deployment, our estimates are about $13 to $15 million a year in savings on O&M, as opposed to a $500 million O&M spend for a year. So, a few percent. But more important, the relationship with the customer has improved, and you're seeing it as people convert to using the tools that we have available to them any way they want them, whether it be on the web or on their iPhone, to find out what's happening on their bill, getting notices when they're reaching certain thresholds that they set. We let them know, you expect to spend $200 this month for electricity, you're at $150, got a half a month to go. You better do something if you don't want a higher bill. But the other piece to it, and I mentioned that trunk transmission line that we just completed, a 500 kilovolt line that links the two systems together. What this will do is it'll enable us to meet the pretty aggressive portfolio standard. Not as aggressive as yours, but 20% by 2025. That's pretty aggressive. To meet it less expensively, because we have more geothermal power in Northern Nevada than Northern Nevada itself could have used. So it'll free up more geothermal to flow to Southern Nevada, and it'll enable us to get to the renewable portfolio standard on a cost-effective basis. So it's a combination of things, but I'm proud of what we've done for the customer.
We've kind of seen some themes in the comments already of pretty significant investments, some big investment programs. Also, in some cases, a real concentration on how introducing these innovations could help on some of the costs of outages, reducing the time, trying to help our customers from an affordability standpoint. But both we and our regulators have a little bit of a balancing act to do here between trying to have a really resilient, reliable grid, also a very clean grid, but trying to keep the rates affordable. I think it'd be, especially since we have some regulators coming up in the next panel, none of them from your states, by the way. I think that was done by design. But I'd like to hear from all of you. How do you find that dialogue with your regulators about that trade-off between making an investment to modernize the grid, help with reliability, be able to integrate different types of resources, but still keeping rates affordable. Do you find regulators excited about this, or are they wringing their hands over how they're going to do that balancing act along with you? Leslie, you want to start off?
We actually have found that our regulators are very excited about this and very engaged in what is happening in the industry because they see it as an opportunity to improve service levels to our customers. So they have been very supportive of the efforts that we've had underway. I think what matters is the dialogue that we have with each other, helping them understand the science behind what we're doing as well as the economics and how those pair up and how those benefit customers, which is at the center of what we both are concerned in doing, in making sure that customers get their needs met and that they're satisfied with the level of service they're getting for the price that they're having to pay. So I think that continuing that open dialogue, continuing to keep satisfaction levels high for the customers that we serve obviously takes the pressure off the regulator to have to do something about it. We don't create a situation or an issue for them by openly embracing and engaging in the development of technology as well.
Well, I would agree with Leslie. We share actually some of the same regulators, at least in Florida. I found our regulators to actually be excited about new technology, but the conversation is a robust one. They really want to understand what is the technology, what are going to be the benefits, and frankly, it also is incumbent upon us to spend time with the major customers and those who represent the major customers, the industrials, the retail customers, because a lot of their clients for these organizations that represent them and are typically intervene in cases in front of the Public Service Commission, they're focused on quarterly earnings. And so many times they're not really that keen on seeing us make investments that may have a longer payback period than 6 months or a year. And so it's important to have the conversation as to what are the short-term benefits, what are the long-term benefits that come from these type of investments. I think with the smart grid technology and the resiliency of the grid, that's a little bit of an easier conversation. I have been surprised that over the years it's been a difficult conversation when it comes to investing in new high-efficiency generation, as an example. We've gone before our commission many times asking for permission to tear down an old oil plant and build a gas-fired plant, and I have yet to have one of the interveners stand up and say, that's a great idea. In fact, they fought it every single time, but they are the recipients of lower bills today because of that, and easy to demonstrate. But it is a very difficult type of conversation to have because our perspective in utilities is a very long horizon, relatively speaking, to many other companies. So that communication that Leslie was talking about is so important for us to continue to have that and to be able to demonstrate where the value drivers are, short-term and long-term.
And I'm very much in agreement. I think the initial conversation, the important conversation, is really with the customer. And I think it's really important that that customer understand what the investment is that we're making. And they need to understand how they benefit from that. The residential customer and industrial customer also needs to know that there are some options. I mean, we offer a wide range of conservation programs, but I think we can never forget that it's also very important to hear this story from us, and we don't let the media and others take this story to our customers for us. And when we followed that formula, we've found support.
I feel like I'm in school because I was always a Y at the end of the alphabet, so last one to go, which probably means you're going to ask me. You're going to ask. I know you are.
For special questions.
I know you are. I know what's coming.
Fix your wagon.
I know what's coming. When I got to the company 11 years ago, and it's hard to believe it's 11 years already, I found a company that did not communicate with its regulator, it didn't communicate with its customer, it didn't communicate with its legislature, and it was on financial hard times. Now, was it cause and effect? I'll never know because I wasn't there when these breakdowns of communication happened. But just like any relationship, like you have with your spouse or you have with your child, if you're not communicating, there's always this wonderment of what's going on.
Is that the problem I've been having?
Yeah. You're not talking about with Marion, are you? But it wasn't, this wasn't rocket science. It was a matter of first talking with our customers and saying, here's what the problem is, and here's what we're trying to do to solve it. then going to the regulator before we made any filings and say, here's what our customers are saying, they're supportive of this, and here's what we think the outcome is going to be. And as it turned out, over a period of 6 years, we went from owning 3,000 megawatts to over 6,000 megawatts. Great upward pressure on general rates, but great downward pressure on fuel and purchase power. The end game was a flat price, more reliability. We had the highest reliability in the U.S. by the last count that was done, and certainly in Southern Nevada. And by and large customers who were happy and had the chance to leave and haven't left, which to me is the proof being in the pudding. Right. So, communicating with all constituents is an imperative for success.
So we'll start mixing it up a little bit. You ready, Michael?
I'm ready.
I
called it to myself.
Actually, I'm going to call on Dave for this one. So, Dave, you have a number of states that Xcel is involved in, and many of those have been really at the forefront of renewables and involvement with DG as well as utility scale renewables. What special challenges have you found in trying to take a very different kind of generating resource, much more intermittent, variable, and integrating that? And what role has your investment in the grid been playing in integrating those more variable resources?
Well, I think the first challenge has really been getting the pricing right. Too many times there's been efforts to meet both policy goals as well as try to establish economic costs in the same proceeding. As a result, the transparency of the result becomes blurred. But it's really incumbent on us to send the right pricing signals. It's important that we distinguish in those prices what's incentive is what's truly avoided costs, and also to get out and once again educate the public and the regulators as to what the real economic impact of these resources are on the system.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please, absolutely.
I completely agree. I mean, Florida Power and Light is part of the family of NextEra Energy, and so our sister company, NextEra Energy Resources, is the largest producer of electricity from wind and solar in the United States. We've invested a lot of money over 20 years. We've been in the business, and in Florida, we've built more solar than anybody in the state by far. Commercial solar, we've done 110 megawatts. That's what the state allowed anybody and everybody to do, and we've done it. But it's interesting. There's a big push for a lot of renewables. We come from a renewables background, love renewables, but we really like smart renewables, economic renewables. And you'll notice if you go around Florida that even though the company with more installed wind turbines than anybody in the United States is headquartered there, there's not a single wind turbine in Florida. And it's because it doesn't make economic sense to do that in any kind of scale, and you have to really do it on scale for it to make sense. There are 55 electric providers in the state of Florida. We represent about half of the state. We are the lowest bill out of 55 electric providers in the state. The highest bill in the state is in a municipal that, unfortunately, a few years ago, with all the best intentions, made a decision to make a big push into using renewable energy, and they went down the path of feed-in tariffs for solar and contracts under biomass, and unfortunately now they have the highest bill in the state, and they're locked into it for a while. And it's not that renewables are bad and fossil is good or vice versa. It's that you have to really look at what's the best application at the right spot, and then try to make sure that you have that dialogue with all of your constituents, and to Michael's point, whether it's regulators, legislators, customers, listen to what they want, but also have an honest conversation about what are the benefits and what are the realistic costs of what's going to happen. Because I do worry about the fact that those folks who live now in that municipal, as an example, will be turned off to doing renewables in the future for a long time because they're paying very high bills for a number of years to come.
So Leslie, I'm just curious, in some of your states, so for Georgia, Are you seeing much of a push for DG,
We
net
are.
energy metering, that type of thing?
We are. In fact, in Georgia, we have one of the largest voluntary solar programs in place currently today. 210 megawatts by 2016, and that's been expanded now to 525 megawatts, which is both utility scale and distributed. So the interesting thing about that is the point that you brought up, that our commission is very much aware of not putting upward pressure on rates. So this solar has to be competitive with current generation sources that we have available to serve customers with today as well. Obviously, we support a full portfolio of options. If you heard our line, and what we speak publicly is that we do look for a balanced portfolio, diversified fuel, even from a gas perspective. We've grown as a gas consumer to being the third largest consumer of gas, going from 14% of that being part of our fuel in 2008 to over 42% in 2013. So we're very much engaged in making sure that all sources of generation are a part of that portfolio for serving our customers going forward.
So Michael, you know, in our great state of California, we have a pretty good-sized debate going on about long-term, whether we would have large central station generation, even in the renewables world. Will that be kind of utility scale, 200 megawatt, 300 megawatt, say solar farms out in the desert? Or will it really show up more in the form of distributed generation, actually in the distribution system itself? In Nevada, are you seeing much of that debate, utility scale versus DG, as the wave of the future? And if so, what do you think?
Let me start with a predicate and a bias. Eric mentioned NextEra Resources. I was the first president of FPL Energy when we started growing that wind and solar business. So I'm familiar with renewable energy and its pluses and minuses. What we've seen in our state is a somewhat of a policy debate. What is the reason for having a portfolio standard in the first place? Is the reason to create markets? Is the reason to reduce fossil fuel consumption, to improve the environment? Or is it to give customers options? And where we're trying to drive the dialogue is the last piece of it. To say that if our customer wants to put DG on their roof, and that's the solution that they want, irrespective of what the economics are. You know, we have some people who are very, very wealthy in our state who want to claim being green. That's fine. It's the most ineffective, or least cost-effective way of producing green energy. But if that's what they want to do, we should offer that to them as an option. Our belief is that we should also have the ability to carve out a piece of one of our central station generating plants and say, if you want to contract for that, here's what the price is for that. But you don't have to go through putting capital out to do that. If you want to lease, you can do that. But we believe that we need to offer those options to our customers rather than having third parties come in and say, let's, to use the fancy word, disintermediate you from your utility, and then go through the harangue of the debate on pulling the plug and whether that's really possible and all that. We're going through that debate, Ted, and we faced that in our last legislative session about a year ago, where Solar City and others were coming in, and we have attempted to level the playing field without being tainted by some of the discussion about being negative toward DG. All we're saying is, we've heard this time and time again, and it's become almost a buzzword, the value of the grid has to be what is our nomenclature. At the end of the day, if you think about what the business model of DG is, it doesn't stand up without our infrastructure. It doesn't exist. It can't exist without some form of storage. People don't want to be dark when it's nighttime or when it's cloudy, especially when it's 115 degrees in Las Vegas, you can imagine.
It's a dry.
It's a dry heat, but it's heat. It is heat like you've never experienced at 115 degrees if you haven't been there. Now I'm off topic, of course, but I think the debate is coming to Nevada, and I say that because it would be impossible to believe that it's in California and in Arizona, but not in Nevada. we have been very good at describing the issues to our regulators, legislators, and it's one of the few times that we have our consumer advocate on our side. But I do think when we have a conclusion on this model, change model, it has to be dealing with the customer the way the customer wants to be dealt with, because otherwise someone else is going to stand in between us and our customer. We got to get that model right.
Yep. That's great.
But can I also think it's going to become a social debate, because you made a very good point. I think the technology is going to get there. People are going to be able to afford to do this, but I think it's going to be this have and have-nots. Those that can afford it will implement it, and then the have-nots are left with the stranded resources or stranded assets to deal with. So I think it's a regulator dilemma going forward from a social aspect as this further develops.
I mean,
Yeah.
you get to a point where you say, how much is the regulator willing to move
Exactly.
on price?
Yeah.
I always like thinking about extremes. I talked about this with smart meters. We had a big debate about opting out. And there was no science behind it, and the commission said no science. There was no economic reason to opt out, and yet customers were given the option to opt out. So I said, okay, let's suppose 15 customers in a state of 2.5 million say, I don't want a smart meter. Are they really going to pay the full boat for keeping meter reading force out there? Of course not. It's the same kind of thing. Who really will be left holding the bag? And the answer is, we are, or our shareholders are, if we're not careful in forming the debate and
That's
being
right.
honest with our regulators and our legislators and our customers as to what the end game is.
So we've got a great audience here, I can tell, and you know where I'm going with this, right? This is audience participation time.
Don't ask Mitnick a question.
But I want to make sure we do have time for a couple of questions. Of course, I can't see any of you, but I see one question here in the front. Why don't you, a mic is coming your way.
Yeah, I want to ask a question that came up in the earlier panel, which is, do you need to be active offering services on your customer's side of the meter? Are you in trouble if you don't do that, if you don't embrace social media and those things, or are you better off stopping at the meter and making sure the power gets to it?
I see those as two separate things. I think social media it has to be part of our equation for a variety of reasons. One, it's a very cheap way for us to get our messaging out, much less expensive than any other form of media. But secondly, if we look at the demographics, the conversion of the younger people who don't really have other forms of media, their preferred form of media is social media or direct contact through their form of iPhones. We have to do that, and I think we're seeing more and more of that in the industry. We've been down the road of providing energy services. Back when I got, maybe even before I got to FPL was selling refrigerators. We've been down that road before, and I'm not suggesting that it isn't something we should always look at, but my belief is that energy services are going to be in the form of allowing our customer to be able to utilize the intelligence that is in their home to pay whatever bill they want to pay. It's a little like progressive insurance. They say name your price, which of course we all know is ridiculous, but if you're not going to say, okay, I want to pay $3 a year for car insurance. We know that's not going to happen, but there has to be something reasonable where the customer will say, this month I can only afford to pay $150, and behind the scenes, smart technology in the home using smart appliances will make that happen with it being transparent to our customers. If we can provide that avenue for them to do that, that again is a lot better than someone else doing it, but it's a very small margin business. So just like being in the retail business in a lot of markets that people are saying the marketing costs kill you, it's something we have to look at but figure out what the business model is, or others will be supplying that. But I'm not terribly concerned about that as far as
Anybody else want to take
profitability is concerned.
Anybody else want to take a crack at it?
I think we will provide the platform, which is the grid, and the energy service providers and others will provide the applications to use that over the long run.
More of a
But I think it is incumbent, because you asked, do we focus on delivering power to the meter? Yes. That is the fundamental building block of the service that we must be good at providing. And then you have the trust to decide with the customer, and then you can mutually decide what's best. But to Michael's point, you also have to know what you're good at and maybe what you're not. Going out and building dishwashers is probably not going to be an area that we're going to focus on. But interfacing with the customer in a way to help them manage their energy, that is an area that we are familiar with and can help the customer. This also breaches into the whole trust issue on data and security and what does the customer really want you to know. We had customer service hearings a year and a half ago, and I was reminded about how the security is an issue for customers when a very sweet lady came up next to me and said, young man, I don't want a smart meter in my house because I don't want you to know how much electricity I'm using. I said, well, ma'am, we do our best to accurately bill you, but so there's a tension that's there that you have to navigate.
And I think for Southern, the same thing is there. We have the relationship, we have the brand with the customer. So I think you'll see us engage, where we'll self-provide, but I also think you'll see us partner up with others to provide some of those services.
Other questions? I see one here. They're going to probably hand you a mic.
Thanks. There's been a lot of discussion about the role of distributed generation, but I didn't hear there very much about the role of energy efficiency, and I was wondering what each of you think about the role of the utility in helping to provide energy efficiency services going forward, whether it's as part of the regulated business or maybe as part of the unregulated business.
I'm sure each of these have a little thought on this. Leslie, you want to start out on that?
Go ahead, Leslie.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll continue to have energy efficiency, demand-side management type programs that'll be in place that they currently are today. But I do think with the technology that we are deploying, obviously we can offer more options from a rate perspective to our consumers that they can choose when they incent them to use our power during those periods of where we don't have peak usage. So I think offering avenues such as that will induce that. But I think through what you're seeing through appliances and other innovations, it's going to happen on its own from that aspect with utility being engaged in that R&D.
And I'll just say on our part, I think it's going to continue. It's a big part of what we do. We've been saving about 1.5% of energy every year at Northern States Power. The economics are changing somewhat, though, with customers using less energy. The cost effectiveness is changing over time. But supplementing that, though, is the fact that data analytics are getting so much better. So we're getting much more efficient at targeting those programs and working with others like municipalities to target those programs so we can continue to get the good results we have.
Yeah, I agree. And energy efficiency is a key component of our business. Demand-side management program is huge for us. We have over 1 million customers on demand-side management. We've avoided 14 medium-sized power plants, so that's resulted in a lot of savings for customers over the years. But you also have to be very smart about what programs are going to be adopted and at what cost. Because there are programs that, again, with good intentions might sound terrific, but can also drive up costs for customers. A refrigerator program that was implemented a couple of years back comes to mind where, again, best intentions get people to take your old refrigerator out of your house and replace it with a new energy efficient refrigerator. And what we found is that that old refrigerator ended up in the garage and became a beer fridge. And, that may sound funny, but what ends up happening is you now put an inefficient refrigerator in a hot space, so it's running even more. It actually increases load. You have to be smart about those things, and this wasn't planned, but you have to be very smart about what makes sense because you don't want to drive up, again, customer bills. You want to look at what programs really do work. Building codes is probably one of the number one thing that really drives energy efficiency. If we're really going to be honest about it, in Florida, that's what's driven it. It's better insulation. It's houses built out of concrete block in Florida because of storms, not because of energy efficiency. And it's also switching into higher SEER level air conditioners. Those changes have really what's been the big driver for energy efficiency that we've seen, along with then good programs that people can take advantage of without unnecessarily driving up prices.
Michael, any final comment there?
just reiterating some of the other comments, and I know we're out of time, Ted, so I'll just pass.
Okay. Well, I certainly have had a great pleasure being with our panelists here. I think they've done a terrific job, and we've covered a lot of territory. So I hope you join me in giving them a round of applause for a great job.